What happens when the most dominant woman in MMA history suddenly can't win a round? Well, you get one of the biggest falls the sport has ever seen. Just like Ronda Rousey, who started the UFC by winning multiple games, armbar after armbar, title defenses in seconds, and even headlines outside the cage. She defended the bantamweight title 6 times, finishing most opponents in under a minute. By 2015, she was 12-0 and looked like the UFC's female Mike Tyson. That illusion ended at UFC 193 in November 2015. Facing Holly Holm, Rousey entered as a massive favorite, but Holm exposed glaring weaknesses in her striking. Holm kept the fight at distance with precise jabs, angles, and footwork, while Rousey swung wildly and failed to secure takedowns. In the second round, Holm landed a devastating head kick that knocked Rousey out cold, one of the most shocking upsets in UFC history. The loss not only stripped her of the belt, but also shattered the aura that had carried her career. Rousey spent over a year away from competition before returning at UFC 207 in December 2016 against Amanda Nunes. The fight was supposed to be her redemption, but instead it marked the end. Nunes immediately lit her up with crisp combinations, exploiting the same defensive flaws Holm had revealed. Within 48 seconds, the referee stepped in as Rousey stumbled under a barrage of punches. The quick, brutal defeat showed that her striking game hadn't evolved and that her mystique was gone for good. After those back-to-back losses, Rousey never returned to MMA. In just 2 fights, she went from an undefeated, dominant champion to a fighter whose decline was undeniable. Holm exposed her limitations, and Nunes confirmed them, ending one of the best runs in UFC history. So the next time you think about Rousey's reign, don't just remember the armbar streak. Remember how fast it all crumbled. 12 wins built her aura, but just 14 minutes of cage time destroyed it. And speaking of hype trains that went off the rails, let's talk about Darren Till, the golden boy who hit his glass ceiling faster than anyone expected. Now, what happens when the UFC markets you as the next Conor McGregor, and then your chin gets cracked in your hometown? This is Darren Till's story. He was the loud kid from Liverpool, unbeaten and confident, but his title shot versus Tyron Woodley exposed him, and his next fight versus Jorge Masvidal completely destroyed him. On September 8, 2018, Till stepped into the biggest fight of his career, challenging Woodley for the welterweight champ belt at UFC 228. He fought aggressively early, but Woodley's experience showed late. In round 2, a right hand dropped Till, followed by a ground assault that started a dark choke submission. It was Till's first loss, and it revealed the weaknesses in his grappling defense, endurance, and composure under pressure. Fast forward to March 2019. Till needed a bounce back. His chance came against Jorge Masvidal in London, but instead he suffered another brutal knockout in round 2. Masvidal's left hook put Till out cold, and with hopes for another title shot on the horizon, everything seemed to slip. At this moment, the aura was gone, and even Till later admitted the Masvidal defeat knocked his confidence badly. Instead of climbing toward title contention, he drifted both in results and public perception. Even while Till's skid was about lost confidence, the next fighter's fall was about lost durability. Every lightweight used to pray they wouldn't get matched with Tony Ferguson, but now they line up for him. Before 2020, El Kuki was a nightmare at lightweight. Wild elbows, non-stop pressure, and multiple submissions from strange angles. He looked unbeatable, and fans were already dreaming of him against Khabib. Unfortunately, all of that momentum shifted at UFC 249. For 5 rounds, Ferguson took bombs. He stayed standing longer than anyone thought possible, but by round 5 he was done. The ref waved it off, and the mystique was gone. Many believe that fight wasn't just a defeat, but the starting point of a major career decline. From that fight on, the Ferguson that scared everyone wasn't there anymore. Charles Oliveira tied him up on the ground. Beneil Dariush dominated him. Michael Chandler front kicked him into the highlight reels. Nate Diaz, Bobby Green, Paddy Pimblett, they all beat him. Then Michael Chiesa finished the job with a quick choke. This resulted in 8 straight losses, from boogeyman to skid record holder. At this point, the change was clear. Old Tony ate shots and came back harder. New Tony couldn't pull the trigger. He looked slower, easier to hit, easier to hold down, like a star athlete whose body suddenly can't keep up with his mind. But not every UFC downfall is about years of damage. Sometimes, one bad night flips a career overnight, just like in the case of Renan Barao. Imagine going nearly 10 years without losing a fight, then getting beat so bad people forget you were ever great. That was Renan Barao. 35 fights unbeaten, a UFC champ, and even analysts calling him the best pound-for-pound fighter on earth. That was until he met with TJ Dillashaw, a massive underdog at UFC 173, who danced circles around him and destroyed the myth. Dillashaw didn't just win, he embarrassed him. 5 rounds of speed, movement, and sharp counters ended with Barao on the canvas. Belt lost and gone. Usually, in boxing, a champ might lose and bounce back with tune-ups. But in MMA, a beating like that rewrites your whole career overnight. The rematch proved it wasn't a fluke. Dillashaw stopped him again, this time in the 4th. After that, Barao was never the same. His speed dipped, his confidence cracked, and suddenly the next great Brazilian legend was fighting on prelims instead of pay-per-views. So the next time you hear someone brag about a 35-fight unbeaten streak, remember all it takes is one bad night, and the king becomes an afterthought. But Barao isn't the only fighter with such an unfortunate situation in the UFC. Now imagine cutting nearly 50 pounds just to make a fight, then wondering why your body gives out when it matters most. That was Johny Big Rig Hendricks, the guy who pushed Georges St-Pierre to the brink. The guy who took Robbie Lawler's head off to grab the vacant welterweight belt at UFC 171. For a moment, he looked like the next long-reigning champion, but the rematch at UFC 181 destroyed him completely. Hendricks dominated early with pressure and power, but then the weight cut caught up to him. His gas tank emptied. Lawler turned up the heat in the later rounds, stealing momentum and the decision. And just like that, his belt was gone. But here is the problem. Hendricks wasn't just fighting opponents. He was fighting his own scale. Reports had him ballooning to 218 pounds between fights, then slicing down to 170. You see, in boxing, you can hide behind gloves and slower pacing. In MMA, that kind of cut wrecks your cardio, your chin, your whole game. After the belt slipped away, Hendricks looked different. Missed weights, sluggish performances, and an eventual forced move to middleweight. The guy who once looked like a wrecking ball became a fighter trying to survive his own body. While Hendricks collapsed under the weight of his own body, the next UFC fighter collapsed under the weight of expectations. What's worse, getting robbed on the scorecards or never being the same after, because Dominick Reyes didn't just lose a decision that night. He lost the momentum of an undefeated contender who'd just taken Jon Jones to the brink. Many fans still swear he won that fight. Jones got the decision. Reyes got the applause, but the belt stayed on the champ's waist. In hindsight, it was the start of a collapse. Instead of getting a rematch, Reyes fought Jan Błachowicz for the vacant title. This time, there was no argument. Jan crushed him in round 2, exposing the weaknesses in Reyes' striking and shutting down the future champ hype overnight. Then, there was the highlight reel. Jiří Procházka's spinning back elbow at UFC Vegas 25 sent Reyes face first into the canvas. After that career-ending knockout, Reyes went on a skid. He lost again to Ryan Spann, among others. Each loss chipped away at his standing in the division. It wasn't just the losses themselves, but how they affected Reyes, his confidence, his style, his willingness to take risks. He admitted that after the Jones fight, he lost his way, searching for fixes instead of trusting what got him there in the first place. Everyone loves to say Reyes pushed Jon Jones to the limit. True, but in fighting, almost is just another word for forgotten, and that's exactly what happened next. Even while Reyes fell from an almost champ status, Anthony Pettis fell from Wheaties box cover boy to struggling gatekeeper. One day you are in a Wheaties box. Next you are just another name on a contender's resume. That was the Anthony Showtime Pettis story. He wasn't just a champ, but a human highlight reel. Flying cage kicks, flashy knockouts, and ESPN clips on repeat. For a moment, he looked like the future of MMA itself. In 2014, he was the guy the UFC held up as the face of the sport. Then UFC 185 happened. Rafael dos Anjos walked in as the underdog and left with Pettis' soul. Pressure from the opening bell, clinch work, takedowns, sharp boxing. And suddenly, Pettis couldn't get off the cage, couldn't get into rhythm, couldn't breathe. By the fifth round, the judges didn't even need to think, but gave 50-45 across the board. Unlike football, where you can lose big one week and bounce back the next, a one-sided beatdown in MMA changes everything. After surgery and a string of uneven performances, he slipped into the gatekeeper role. The flashy skills were still there in flashes, but the invincibility was gone. Showtime had become intermission. But sometimes, not every UFC fallout is sudden. Just like in the case of BJ Penn. Try saying the name BJ Penn to old school fans and watch their eyes light up. But bring up his late career and watch them wince. BJ wasn't just good, he was the prodigy, champion at both lightweight and welterweight. A pioneer, a guy who made fighting look effortless. For years, people treated him like MMA royalty. Then Frankie Edgar showed up. At UFC 112, Edgar didn't just beat Penn, he changed how people saw him. The decision was close, but the rematch erased all doubt. Edgar's speed, his takedowns, his footwork, it all made Penn look a step behind. In the UFC, one loss can redefine your whole legacy. And once fans see you as beatable, the aura doesn't come back. Meanwhile, Penn didn't just lose once. He fought Edgar a third time in 2014, this time at featherweight, and it was brutal. He looked slower, smaller, and older. By the third round, Edgar was landing unanswered shots until Herb Dean finally waved it off. Watching Penn that night felt less like watching a legend fight and more like watching a legend fade. From there, it was downhill. Penn kept coming back, but the magic was gone. His timing, his cardio, his power. Everything that once made him great looked stuck in the past. He became a skid, not a streak. One win in his last 7 fights. Fans went from asking, "Who can BJ beat next?" to "Why is BJ still fighting?" So the next time you hear about the prodigy, remember it's about who he was, not who he became. And if Penn's story felt like watching a legend crumble, Cain Velasquez's was a whole different scenario. In many cases, altitude doesn't usually choke out champions. But in Mexico City, it did. Cain Velasquez was supposed to be the baddest man alive. Endless gas tank, smothering wrestling, and cardio that made heavyweights look like they were moving underwater. Fans thought he would run through Fabricio Werdum at UFC 188. Instead, Cain ran out of air. Mexico City sits over 7,300 feet above sea level. Werdum trained there for weeks. Cain? He showed up 2 weeks before fight night. It's like running a marathon with no warm-up while your opponent's been training on a mountain. That difference showed. So Cain gassed early, ate over 100 clean strikes, and looked sluggish in scrambles. By round 3, Werdum locked in a guillotine, and Cain tapped. The heavyweight king just collapsed literally and figuratively. After that night, the injuries piled up. Knee, back, shoulder, you name it. And every time he returned, the things that once made Cain terrifying looked a little less sharp. In football, you can rehab a bad knee and still make plays. In MMA, when your body starts betraying you, it's game over. Before Werdum, Cain looked like the start of a dynasty. After Werdum, he looked like the end of one. And if Cain's downfall felt like a body breaking down, Here is the case of a fighter who became a victim of aura. Say what you want about Conor McGregor, but when he walked to the cage in his prime, you could feel it. The lights felt brighter, the crowd felt louder, and for a while, it felt like losing just wasn't an option. That aura, it cracked, and once it cracked, it never came back. McGregor's rise was sudden. One fight with Jose Aldo, and McGregor erased him in 13 seconds. With Chad Mendes, he outboxed and stopped him. He even stormed and avenged a rematch against Nate Diaz after losing the first fight. Every time it looked like the train might slow down, McGregor found another gear. That's what made him feel untouchable until UFC 229. Khabib Nurmagomedov decided it was a good day to destroy him. It was like watching a Ferrari stuck in traffic. McGregor couldn't get his shots off, couldn't escape, and by round 4, he was tapping to a neck crank. But the real break came later. Dustin Poirier wasn't supposed to knock out Conor. Yet at UFC 257, Conor's chin gave way. First clean knockout loss of his UFC career. Then in the trilogy, his leg literally snapped in half. One fight robbed him of mystique, the other robbed him of momentum. After that, the swagger didn't feel the same. The walkouts were still big, but the aura was gone. Fighters stopped fearing him the way they once did. Injuries, inactivity, and defensive issues turned him from a myth into a man. And the aura? That disappeared the night his losses finally caught up with him. In the end, every one of these fighters had the world at their feet. Champions, prodigies, hype trains, monsters. But in the UFC, the same cage that makes you a legend can turn you into a myth overnight. One loss can erase a streak, flip a career, or steal an aura that never comes back. Because that's the truth about this sport. Nobody stays untouchable forever. Not Ronda, not Cain, not even McGregor. And if history keeps proving anything, it's this. In the UFC, the fall always comes faster than you think.